The fall season is wrapping up and a lot of the outdoor household projects have reached an end. Having a bit more time on my hands lets the mind wander to more creative pursuits. I've dabbled with 3D printing on and off for quite a while, but downloading and printing things made by others has always left me wanting. With the first snowfall the other morning, my thoughts turned to winter and the upcoming holiday season, and I was reminded of my virtual friend, Mr. Flakes. Having recently purchased a resin printer, I thought, what better way to test it out than to transition Mr. Flakes from the virtual to the physical? What follows is not really a tutorial, but more documentation of my journey to bring my little virtual creation to the big, wide physical world. This is my first time doing this, so let's give it a try. I originally created Mr. Flakes in Blender, a completely free and incredibly powerful open source 3D creation suite. Because I upgraded my computer, I needed to reinstall Blender, which I'm doing here. If you don't know who Mr. Flakes is, I'll leave a link to the original video featuring him so you can check him out. Opening the project in Blender, I save a new copy and clear out the scene of everything but Mr. Flakes himself. I've read the 3D Mesh toolbox was the tool to use for this process. My understanding is the tool is supposed to clean up the model and get it ready to export so you can load it into your printer software, which is called a slicer. Well, it's not that easy. The first issue is obvious. The exported model is not smooth, but rather faceted. This is because in the virtual world, the smoothness of a model can be faked, but if it's going to live in the real world, it has to be actually smoothed out by adding more geometry to the model. This is accomplished by adding what is called a subdivision modifier to each part of the model you want to be smooth, and setting the subdivisions to an appropriate level. Here I'm using around 4. The downside is that adding subdivisions will round out sharp edges like the top of the hat. To fix this, I started by putting a bevel on the edge of the hat. A bevel adds more geometry in a way that makes the edges sharper. A second, and I think better way to do the same thing is to add what's called an edge loop, like I'm doing here on the brim as well as the hat band. Again, just creating more geometry. The more you add, the sharper the edge. This time, when the model is exported, it looks the same as it does in Blender. The surfaces are smooth and rounded and the edges are sharp and defined. If I printed this model right now, it would be completely solid. You could certainly do that, but it would use a lot of resin and that would make the print relatively expensive. To mitigate that, it's common practice to hollow out the model to a shell of a few millimeters thickness. I wanted to check the internal structure of the model, so I turned off the infill feature and sliced the model, which brought up the next issue. The model is not completely hollow. Each part, the bottom, the middle, the head, the hat, etc., is a separate, discrete object and is fully formed. This is bad because this means liquid resin can be trapped in the various cavities and never cure. So back to Blender we go. We need to join all the individual pieces together to become one solid mesh. We do this by doing a Boolean union function. Before we do that though, we need to apply all the subdivision modifiers we made earlier. This has the effect of permanently saving the new subdivided geometry to the object. Once the modifiers are applied, you need to make sure the Bool tool is activated. Then simply select the objects to join and hit Union in the Bool tool menu. Once the entire mesh is unified, I went back to the 3D Mesh toolbox and ran a check. The result showed 98 non-manifold edges, so I hit Make Manifold, ran the check again, and that cleared them up. I exported the model again, and this time I opened it in Lychee Slicer, which I feel has better tools to prepare the model. I scaled it up so the model would be 15 centimeters tall. Going to the Hollow tab, I like to use a shell thickness of 1.8 millimeters. Look at that, the model is unified and hollow. I never really intended this video to be a tutorial, and I know I threw a lot of things at you in that last section. If you want to learn more about Blender and how to use it, there are hundreds of great videos made by extremely talented creators, and I encourage you to check them out. Similarly, prepping and slicing a model for printing is way beyond the scope of this video. Again, lots of great content out there that covers the topic in great detail. Therefore, I'll just run this and fast forward. And here comes Mr. Flakes. One thing I don't really like about resin printing is the mess. The resin is toxic and very bad for the environment in its uncured form, so PP is required as well as proper disposal of anything that comes in contact with the uncured resin. I remove the supports before curing as they are much softer and easier to deal with. I then thoroughly wash the model inside and out to remove all the excess resin. Most resin is washed using isopropyl alcohol, but I happen to be using a water-washable resin for this print. But even then, the waste wash water must be processed before disposal. You cannot just dump it down the drain or out on the ground. For some reason, I didn't move the camera over, but you can just see on the left of the screen I finish all the cleaning in an ultrasonic cleaner. Sanding off any blemishes is easier when the resin is uncured and soft. Now I cure the model. Time can vary, but usually 10 minutes does it. If it needs a little more, I give it a shot with the UV flashlight. On with the painting. I first washed the model in warm soapy water and let it thoroughly dry to get any oils off from handling it. Then I primed the surface with Vallejo Gray Surface Primer with a few drops of flow improver, shooting through a GSI Krios airbrush with a 0.5mm needle at about 25 psi. I did several passes, letting the first one flash off before adding the next light coat. I let this cure for 24 hours. Next was the red hat band, painted with Vallejo Model Air Scarlet Red straight from the bottle using a Krios airbrush with a 0.3mm needle. I was getting some tip drying with this application. In hindsight, a drop or two of flow improver may have helped. After that cured, I masked off the band. If you're interested, I'll leave links to all the tools and paints I used in the description below. Next came the main body color, Vallejo Model Air White. For this, I pulled out my old Badger 100 LG with a medium needle. I got this airbrush in 2015, but all the seals had deteriorated because I wasn't very diligent about cleaning it properly. I refurbished it about a week before this video with all new seals, tip, and needle. Now it sprays beautifully. Again, after curing, I masked up the face and head, loaded up the 100 LG with Vallejo Air Black, and sprayed the hat. I love that beautiful flat finish. My masking job was less than stellar as there was some bleed from the black onto the red band. I've read that applying a clear coat after masking can help alleviate this issue because it fills in the small gaps. I'll have to try that next time. The hand painting session was the most humbling thing I've done in a long time. I used to build plastic models when I was young, and I was pretty good at painting the small details. Skip ahead a few years and I find my hand is less, how should I say it, refined. I took a couple of deep breaths, tried to accept the reality and move on. Until I also realized that I couldn't see anything that I was painting. So I had to dig out the magnifying headset. This project was definitely challenging to my self-esteem. All the brushwork was done with a combination of Vallejo model color and air paints. With the color done, I let it cure for 24 hours, then sealed it with a couple coats of AK Ultramatte varnish straight through the Badger. things I learned while making this video. There are very talented folks out there who paint and create and make it look very easy. The reality is otherwise. My hands are not as steady as they used to be, and my eyes are definitely not as sharp as they once were. I think if I made 10 or 20 of these things, I would reach some level of proficiency with airbrushing and hand painting, but this is good enough for now. If you enjoyed the video, let me know down in the comments. Strike a like if you're so inclined. I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who has subscribed to my channel and taken the time to comment on the videos. I'm constantly humbled with each interaction, and I thank you. There's more things swirling around in here, so who knows what's going to come out next. Until next time, I'm mainejason. Get out there and give it a try.